Welcome back to another episode of the Young Guides Podcast. I'm Keaton, and this is...
I'm Kyle.
But first, a word from our partners.
First up, we want to talk about Heather's Choice. If you go to the Heather's Choice website and use our code TheYoungGuides15 at checkout, you can get yourself 15% off site-wide. So go check them out. We got packaroons for snacks. We got dinners. We got breakfasts. We got a bunch of new recipes coming out to you guys. So head on over to heatherschoice.com at checkout. Use our code TheYoungGuides15 and get you guys something for your next outdoor adventure.
Awesome. For our next partner, we have Lucky Bug Lures, home of the Bingo Bug, Zombie Max, Fusion Extreme, Lucky Plug, F-Bomb, and Pike Bomb. They take conventional lures and change them up a little bit, and it helps your fishing and your luck on the water. Go check them out. www.luckybuglures.com. Go get yours today.
All right. Up next, we have Northern Knits. Emily up here in Anchorage knits wool hats and distributes them through her social media platforms. You can find her on Facebook or on Instagram. Her Instagram account is northern._.knits. And you can see some of the hats that she has in stock and order from there, or you can kind of get an idea of what you want, message her, and you can set something up to have a specific pattern or color scheme that you want in your hat. Keaton and I both have one. Well, I actually have several. Keep you very warm. They're very fashionable. They look great. They feel great. You'll look awesome if you wear one. So check her out, Northern Knits.
Next up, we have a friend, Matt, at Alaska Rod Co. He just released a new lineup of rods for the 2022 season. They have a lineup of 8 freshwater spinning rods with actions and power for anglers chasing big, aggressive fish. With lengths ranging from 6 foot to 9 foot, there are plenty of options for various applications and style. In a world full of mass-produced rods, Alaska Rod Co. makes sure that rods and services provide what other brands cannot. Rods built and tested in Alaska.
Matt also is coming out with a new line of fly rods. Alaska Rod Co. fly rods are built for harsh environments while maintaining the utmost level of craftsmanship. Right now, Alaska Rod Co. is 9-foot fly rods ranging from 5 weights to 8 weights. 10-foot single-hand rods, switch, and spare rods will be available late winter or spring. There's enough rod companies out there trying to build the next lightest and flashy rod. Alaska Rod Co. is here to build you a rod you can pass down generations. Fishing means many things to many different people. Alaska Rod Co. is honored to build you the ultimate tool that connects you to that meaning.
If you want to learn a little bit more about Alaska Rod Company, go back and check our previous podcast. We asked him several questions about his rods, his warranties. He does a great job at explaining everything and covering everything about his company. Also, if you have questions, you can always DM him or DM us and we can get you going in the right direction. So, Alaska Rod Co.
Finally, we want to say thank you for listening to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. If you can, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review and a rating. It helps us know that we're doing this for the right reasons, and you guys are giving us some great feedback already. You can also head over to Spotify. They now have a rating feature on the podcast there. So if you could let us know how we're doing, that would be great. It also helps helps us spread the word through you. But makes us pop up on the feeds wherever you listen to podcasts a lot more if you give us a great rating and a great review. You can also head to our website and contact us through that form if there's anything that you think we should know about, if you want to be on our show, or if there's something that we need to work on. You can also find us on Instagram, and same thing, give us some feedback, drop us a message, and we will get back to you.
With Instagram, make sure to also check our story. We before we do our podcast on Thursdays, we always have an option for you guys to ask questions to the people coming on our podcast. And we post a lot of stuff that we like to get viewers and people following us involved. So if you want to head on over, give us a follow and start asking questions and join in on the fun on our Instagram page.
Without further ado, here's the episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. I'm Keaton, and this is
Kylie.
Hey, we got a special guest on today for this awesome podcast, and I figured what a good way to round episode 30. This is it's crazy to think about. Just a few months ago, we started off in this weird dream of having a podcast, and now we're 30 episodes deep. So everyone that's listening and supporting us, we appreciate you. Today we have a really awesome guest, Ben from Double D Outdoors. Super nice guy. Met him at the Sportsman Show. Has a lot of knowledge in fishing and for kokanee and for trout and for salmon. He owns his own company that sells lures, plugs, dodgers, and much more. And it's also veterans owned. So thank you to anyone who serves our country. With that, we're going to learn a little bit more about it today. And with that being said, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kick this off, just let's start out hearing about your background. Tell us where you're from.
From Yakima, Washington. Grew up here, fished all around here pretty much my whole life. Then out of high school, went in the Air Force, did that for a while. Got hurt, ended up getting out. Worked on the sheriff's department for a little bit.
Nice.
And then out of there, or after all that, I decided to start painting and ended up starting my own business, painting spinner blades and plugs and stuff like that.
Nice. That's awesome. So what got you started in fishing in the outdoors? Like, did you start at a young age? Did you start after, or when did that all kind of kick off?
Basically my whole life, I've been fishing, fished with all my family. My whole family fishes, hunts, all that stuff. I was fishing Drano before Drano was popular. I got pictures of me in diapers at Drano Lake when there's two boats out there.
That's awesome.
So a couple years experience doing it, which helps, especially now when it seems to be a pretty popular thing and growing every day. It's unreal how many people I see out now fishing.
And there's a lot of posts about it too. People are always out there.
It's all over social media.
For everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, you said you grew up in the Yakima area, right?
Yes.
And you started salmon fishing. Was that what kind of kicked off the passion for you?
I would say I loved it all. I still love it all.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember back when we were kids, I'd go camping up at Rimrock Lake. We'd go up there, it seemed like every other weekend, or at least once or twice every couple of weeks we'd go and fishing just off the bank there, catching trout and the Kokanee off the bank. I mean, I'd wake up in the morning, first thing, walk down to the bank, and I'd fish there all day almost.
That's awesome.
Didn't matter what I caught.
Yeah.
Trout, Kokanee, and they had the sucker fish in there too. I remember catching quite a few of those.
And they're fun to fight.
They fight like crazy. Yeah.
It's like,
especially when you got a little light trout rod.
Yeah. I always describe suckerfish to people as like, imagine putting like a jetpack on a stick and then sending it down the river.
Exactly.
So strong, but they're just no sport fish at all. They're just strong and they'll give you a good fight. And that's about it. They're like never going to come out of the water. And then at some point you drag it in like a log,
Yeah.
But,
yeah, they put up a good fight for sure.
Yeah. Like a river carp in some way.
Yep.
Well, did your passion for hunting come a little later in life? We kind of touch a little. I know this is fishing, but I want to know a little bit about hunting.
No, hunting, same thing. Grew up doing it my whole life. And yeah, I just never got burned out on it, and I just every single year hunt no matter what.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you start off like deer hunting, or did you kind of do it all? Was your family just around everything? You just hunted what was in season?
Yep. So I started out bird hunting, and I'd go out shoot pheasants or quail or whatever, and then it moved into deer hunting, and then I ended up killing a few deer, and then I was able to start elk hunting once I got a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Was able to walk a little bit more. Then I started elk hunting and never stopped.
That's awesome.
The only thing that I didn't do when I was a kid is my family didn't really turkey hunt. So about the time I got my driver's license is when I started turkey hunting quite a bit.
Nice. Were you self-taught like turkey
turkey hunting? Yes.
Yeah. What a challenge to teach yourself.
Well, it's there's definitely some learning curves, and even if you think you have them dialed, then they do something different. And you're like, I'm not sure why that bird was coming in hot, and then at 100 yards he just stopped.
Yeah.
And it's still gobbling, but will not come any closer.
So, we've talked about hunting, we've talked about fishing. Have you ever guided either of these disciplines here?
No, not. I keep meaning to get my guide's license, but I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
I was gonna get it, I don't know, a couple years ago, thought about it, and it's just I just don't have the time, especially now, because it seems like I'm sitting at home working while everyone else is out fishing, keeping everyone supplied with stuff, with new fishing blades or plugs or whatever they want, and which is a good problem to have. It just cuts in on my fishing time.
Yeah. With guiding and stuff, that just takes up, like, when you're in the guide season, you're just busy all the time. You got a lot, you're spending that time prepping and then going on a trip. And if you have back-to-back trips and you got to go from your trip, getting back home, setting everything up for the next day, and then getting everything going back out again. So I could see that, you got a lot going on already. Don't want to add more to it unless you could go out fishing and paint,
right. Exactly.
That's what you gotta find a way there.
Yeah, I just don't have, like, I got lots and lots of friends that are guides, and like their hours are horrible. Up bright and early in the morning, and then they go out fish, and then as soon as they get off the water, they're tying leaders, getting ready for the next day, and then they're in bed. Well, then they wake up at 1-2 o'clock in the morning, boom, doing it all over again.
Yeah,
sure. And prepping, making sure you get the time to go get stuff, because like you're gonna, I don't care who you are, you're gonna lose stuff when you're out.
Oh yeah.
So
tying
leaders, everything.
Yeah.
There's so much behind the scenes that goes into guiding that I feel like a lot of people don't see. You got to get food for your clients and ice for the cooler and, gas for everything, especially, if you're guiding out of a sled, whatever.
Yeah.
So
it's hard or people don't realize how much work goes into it until they actually get a little taste of it. And they're like, oh man, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. I feel like all the jobs kind of in the fishing industry they got long days, long hours.
Yeah.
And you got to have some work ethic, because you're going to be working hard. We were just talking about this the other day, and it's like, you're the chef, you're the teacher, you're the safety instructor, you're the rower, or the one running the boat. And it's like, man, photographer, yeah,
backhand, clean up,
yeah, prepper, all that stuff. So,
well, yeah, people only get a taste of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you go on a guide trip, like the ones I've gone on, I just show up and they hand me the fishing rod and they're like, okay, put it here. You know?
Here you go.
Yeah. So
Let it out 30 feet. Well, then you got people that don't listen and let it out 60. And you're like, well, why you hung up? Look at the line counter and they're at 65 and losing line. You're like, what the?
oh, that's awesome. Well, cool.
So if you were to choose, I mean, you were saying you've spent all this time painting and creating lures and, you know, supplying these other guides. If you had an ideal season or an ideal species that you could pick to guide and then dedicate the rest of your year to creating lures, what would that ideal season or species be?
I'd say it would be Kokanee. I'd
Okay.
enjoy Kokanee.
Nice.
Guiding for them. Just seems to be more action packed versus trolling around for a springer or a steelhead, and then you may or may not catch them. It might be a good day, might be a bad day. Typically with Kokanee, it's generally always a good day because you're going to find fish eventually.
Yeah.
For sure.
So before we kind of get rolling into the Kokanee, I want to touch right here. What made you start like creating your own blades, your own plugs, your own lures, dodgers? Like before the business, like did you just feel like, hey, I could do this better? Hey, I want my own colors. I want to be able to have my own choice and varieties. Like what was your leading factor into that?
All the above. So I was about 25, so about 10 years ago, I got a cheap little airbrush kit, and because I wanted something different that someone just couldn't go to the store and buy off the shelf. I wanted, like, even if it was a little black dot or just whatever, something to set it off. So I started doing that just for me, and then started doing some stuff for some buddies, doing the colors that they wanted or adding whatever they wanted to add to a super bait or whatever it was, a plug. And then the last, I don't know, probably 4 years, I started doing it more and more and more. And then people are like, oh, you should just start selling it. Just start selling it as like a side deal. Just do stuff on the, or just make or paint or do whatever, but just do it as a side gig. So I started doing that. Well, then it got too busy. So then I had to make a choice whether I was going to stay at working for the job that I was working or take the leap and jump both feet in and go for it full time.
Yeah.
So I made that choice, and then I was able to paint more blades. And then I started moving more into like having a Kokanee section, like a salmon section type deal, like walleye plugs, doing that. And then it really took off from there, because before I was mainly doing just super baits or like plugs.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Crazy. How was the change of pace from going from like an everyday job into running your own business and relying on like sales and everything of that sort?
So they both have their perks. Some days I wish I still worked a normal like 410 job, go to work, and then I leave, and that's all I had to worry about was just what I was doing at work. There was no like doing invoices, doing answering customer questions all hours of the day, trying to keep up with like the social media stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot more work than I anticipated. It's definitely a full-time job trying to keep everything going.
Yeah. No, I believe that.
And some long hours.
Yeah. Do you try to spend your day, like, do you try to spend the majority of your day like doing a bunch of work, spending like a longer day so that you can have a day off here and there to go out and go fishing?
So it typically seems to work whenever I plan something, then I'll get like a massive order that I've got to get done. So it never fails. That always seems to be the way that it works. But generally, if I feel like I'm in a good spot where I can take a day off to go fish or whatever, then I will. I just kind of base it on what the sales are at that time.
Yeah.
But I'll wake up first thing in the morning, go out, paint X amount of blades right off the bat. So I have those, get caught up on whatever I'm getting low on, get those all knocked out, and then I'll mess around, maybe do some plugs, paint some of those up for myself or for someone else.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay, so Ben, with Springer season upon us, let's kind of talk about what setup do you like to use when you fish for springers? What colors do you prefer to use for springers? You don't have to give away any of your, super secret setups, but let's hear the basics.
So generally like Drano in the wind, it'll be a 360 flasher with a spinner behind it. That's the most common setup down there. I like to stick with like greens, chartreuse. It kind of just depends on the day and what they want, because one day it'll be green and then the next day they won't touch green. But the flasher, I like the chrome flashers, so that's basically all I use is all just chrome. In the Leos, I know you can get a couple different colors, and those work good too. And those flashers are actually one of my favorite because you can do an inline flasher or you can do a 360 with it. So it's kind of the best of both. If you just want to run an inline, you can still use it as an inline, or you can run it as a 360. But that's the most common Springer setup down there that you'll see is a 360 with a spinner behind it. And it's kind of changed. It used to be guys would run just a lot of plugs, a lot of inline flashers with a prawn spinner behind it, which they still work down there. It just seems that the new thing is the 360 with a spinner behind it.
Nice. Do you find that when you go and fish different regions of the state, that maybe your colors or your sizes might change up for springers?
So as far as down at like Drano in the wind, it's usually like a 3.5 spinner is typically what people run. You can run a number 3 spinner, or you can run a number 4 spinner. I've got customers in Portland that run 4s, and there's some that run 5s. It just kind of depends where you're at. Now, fishing the Yakima River, which I'll start doing next week. For there, it's more of a float with eggs, or if you're on a boat, you can do plugs, back troll plugs through holes. That's a really good way. You can do bait divers with eggs in the spin and glow behind it work really well. And on the Yakima, it's hit or miss. It can be green, it can be pink, it can be yellow. It just kind of depends. I've had best luck on white, like a plug with white on it. For whatever reason, fishing the Yakima off on back trolling plugs, it seems that white, they really like it or don't like it, I guess.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Springers.
What's that?
Oh, those springers are just so picky.
Oh, yeah. Springers are the hardest, actually.
You said springers are the hardest?
Yeah, in my opinion, they're hard. The springers, they're pretty tough.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of them. That makes sense to begin with. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot less of them, and they seem to be more finicky as far as their bite.
Is it when you do get a fish to bite, is it like a subtle bite? Is it kind of an aggressive take? Like what do you see? What are you looking for when you're looking for that bite?
Fishing with bait, it's more of like a chomp, 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 like they're chewing on it type bite.
Yeah.
Versus fishing plugs, you're back trolling a plug or trolling a plug. It's more violent.
Yeah.
more of like a hard takedown. If people haven't seen a plug takedown, some of those videos are crazy. Those fish hammer those plugs. Whereas they're like, if you're doing eggs or a prawn spinner, they're more chewing on it, versus they're just wanting to beat the crap out of it.
Yeah. Do you find springers are more likely to like spit your hook, or you're like you mentioned, they're kind of finicky, so will they like eat it and then they'll just kind of let it go? Or
Yep, that's the one of the common problems, it seems like, is people lose a lot of springers for that exact reason. Is they for whatever, they can go up, and I don't know how they do it, and bite a treble hook, chomp, bite it, take line, and then let it go.
yeah,
I don't know how they do it, but they do it.
it's almost like they're like putting the plug in their mouth like sideways or something, and just taking off with it, right, instead of grabbing it from the back where the treble hook might be. So
yep. Yeah, I mean, you can't hardly hold treble hooks in your hand without getting stuck, let alone have that thing in your mouth.
Yeah. I do like, I'll do some bass fishing with treble hooks, and I swear, like, every time I go to grab that lip and I'm like starting to shake it, I'm always getting myself or like my clothing, or I mean, it just seems like it's like you're a magnet to the treble hook. So
yep.
Yeah.
It seems to me like when you're trying to unhook a treble hook from a fish, you hook it initially with one hook, and somehow trying to get it out, you get all three stuck in the lip.
Yeah.
Every time. Except when it's a springer.
It's like you said, it's like that one, or you'll have like you'll run like a crankbait, and I swear, like, you'll undo the three in the back, and it's like the crankbait like falls into its mouth. So you'll hook the other three, and you're just sitting there. You're like, I feel like I'm just unhooking this fish for like 5 minutes, and yeah, just crazy stuff. So
in Alaska, we'll take treble hooks off plugs and put Siwash hooks on because it's just so much easier to deal with.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, cool. We kind of touched based on springers. Let me ask one more thing. What would be your go-to setup from like Double D Outdoors when you're going to fish springers? Like what? Like if you
number one deucer and my top selling spinner blade would be my Rotten Banana spinner blade.
Fitting.
It absolutely kills springers. Like,
cool.
It is on fire. And it's been like that the last 2 years. I would run that behind a 360, a Pro Troll or a Leo's, whichever your choice is. But that, if I had to run just one, that's the one that I would run.
Color of choice.
Yeah.
Cool. Switching gears, let's talk a little bit about one of the reasons we brought you on the podcast, and you were mentioning you if you could do it, you would only fish kokanee, and then talking a little bit about trout here. What kind of rods do you like to use for kokanee? I know this is like a big question for, like, you get into like the kokanee guys that really get into it, and they like those very sensitive rods. Like, what's your go-to rod setup, and then what are you running for these kokanee?
So I like a ultra light rod, or a pretty light rod. That way you can see and make sure that everything's running right down below you. The kokanee rods go anywhere from $25 to $300. It just depends on what you want. I really like the Eagle Claw kokanee rod. It's $30, and throw a line counter reel, which is important as a line counter reel. Throw that on it, and you got a setup, and you're under $100.
Nice.
And then with the rod, I'll run. It depends. So generally, I'll run a 6-inch or a 4-inch Dodger. it seems like Chelan, it didn't really seem to make a difference whether it was a 6 or a 4-inch Dodger. But I know that over on the west side, just talking to people at the sportsman shows, they were saying that they want all the small Dodgers, the 4-inch Dodgers. That's what they want. And then I'll just follow that with a wedding ring type setup. Throw on some sort of pink spinner blade, size 1 to 2 to 3, and then tip it with corn or maggots.
Yeah. And you were telling me when I met you at the sportsman show, what's kind of your go-to? Do you like to soak your corn in something? Do you like to soak the maggots in something? Or is there anything special that you like to do with that?
Yep. So my corn or maggots, whatever I'm using, I'll generally soak it the day prior normally. Soak it in whatever scent that I'm using, Kokanee scent. And then there is some additives that you can add to your corn to kind of firm it up. I'll do that from time to time. It doesn't really seem to make a difference for me. You got to be sure to keep whatever bait you're using cool. It's kind of like anything else.
Yeah.
Because if your corn gets warm or your maggots get warm, then they don't hold as well to your hooks.
Yeah. So are you keeping them on ice then?
Yes. Yep. Yep. I keep my corn in a Tupperware container, and with the scent, whichever scent that I'm going to run, I'll keep it in the cooler and keep it cold.
The only reason I asked, do you keep it on ice? Because it's like, well, you could keep it cool if you just keep it out of the sun, a little bit.
Right.
So I was looking for more specific there, but yeah.
It just kind of depends on time of the year. If it's middle of the summertime, obviously, you need to keep it cool. But if you're fishing like Roosevelt in the wintertime, it's not as big an issue unless you want to keep it from freezing maybe on some of those days.
Yeah.
So do you find that depth plays a big role in Kokanee fishing?
So depth and electronics.
Yes.
Electronics are huge. That is like, if you're going to spend any money anywhere, you want good electronics. Because after you get, or you find where the fish are at, you just drop it down to 20 feet to whichever depth that you see the pods at on your fish finder, and generally you'll find them. If you don't have good electronics or any electronics at all, it's a lot of searching, just hoping that you're at the right depth, and then just play with your depth until you find one. And then once you get them figured out, then you can keep going through the school, because generally there's going to be more.
Yeah. The crazy thing about Kokanee for me is, like, I'm in some of those Kokanee forums, and those guys will be like, yeah, today I was headed into the wind at 5.3 knots, and I had it off the right side at 23.6, depth, and that's where I found all the Kokanee sitting. And that's the specifics of Kokanee fishing is just like different from most fishing you do, right? Like, I mean, salmon fishing, you just kind of, like, in the sound, you get it into that depth range, and you hope to find them out there. But, like, it just seems like there's a lot of specifics to Kokanee.
There is and there isn't. If me and you were going to go fish Lake Chelan, we'd show up, go out, find the fish on the fish finder, and then drop it down to whatever, and then troll through them.
Yeah.
I just run my kicker motor at idle most of the time. And that's usually right around, it's less than a mile an hour. It's pretty slow. And then end up hooking fish.
Yeah. Is there other ways to fish Kokanee than trolling them? Like, is it productive to jig or anything for them?
So guys, I know I've never done it, but I know that guys in the wintertime will jig for them, and into the springtime will jig for kokanee. I'm not sure how they do it or where they're doing it at. I've seen it on social media pop up. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But me personally, I've never done it. The only thing that I do when I go kokanee fishing is troll. I don't just sit. But I know guys will run a slip bobber or a float and fish for kokanee as well.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So I had never actually kokanee fished until this past winter, and it was a whole new ball game for me. I hadn't, used downriggers a lot. I wasn't aware of the whole setup and how much really goes into that. So first question, are you using downriggers when you fish for kokanee?
Yes, I always use downriggers. I use downriggers as much as I can, just because I can control my depth a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's right next to the boat, whereas if you start fishing cannonballs, your line's pretty far back behind the boat, which can be a benefit, but you're not exactly 100% on where it's at in the water.
So
run downriggers.
If you were to explain to someone who'd never seen a downrigger before or never used a downrigger before, could you kind of like explain that setup specifically for kokanee?
So a downrigger is basically a arm that goes out the side of the boat with a big wheel, and at the end of that line, it's wheeled with line or cable, and at the end of that cable or line is a heavy lead weight, normally right around 10 to 12 pounds, and you attach your fishing rod line to a clip that's connected to that ball or anywhere on that downrigger line, connect it, and then you feed the downrigger ball down with the wheel letting off the handle, and it'll set it to whatever depth you want.
Yeah. The first time using downriggers, the whole system was so weird to me because I mostly like spin fished my life, and when I go salmon or I'd be out spin fishing rivers. So my friend took me out on the Sound like a couple years ago, and the first time I hooked into a salmon, he's like, "Okay, you got to pop it out of the clip." I was like, "I'm gonna lose the fish if I pop it." And he's like, "No, that's kind of like you're set. You like reel down tight and pop it, and then start reeling." And I was like, "So you want me to crank down, get your rod kind of bending, and then pop it as hard as I can, and the fish is gonna stay on?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I want you to do." And then I did it, and I was like, "Oh, this is like such a cool system, but also how weird."
Yeah, my wife struggles with that still. She'll like reel down and then be like trying to pull up. I'm like, you gotta like, it's all one motion, like reel down and then just one fluid motion, pop it up. Yeah. And she's got it dialed in now, but there for a while it was hard. I'm like, reel down and lift up, like reel down, pop it off. Yeah. And it's tough because you're looking for that sweet spot to where it just instantly pops off and then you get a reel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as it pops off, then you're fighting the fish. So you got to catch up to the fish because there's a delay.
Yeah. Well, my buddies found that different clips like affect the way you like pop too. And he's like, I switched from these. I don't remember the clip names, but he's like, there's like red clips to like these blue clips. And he's like, yeah, this makes like, he's like, here, pop it out of this one. And I like tried it, and it's like, you got to reel like all the way down and just like yank it. And then the other ones, you kind of like reel a little bit and just give it a little tap and it comes up. So, I mean, that's just a whole nother part to the system to catch. And the whole downriggers for kokanee was like mind blowing to me, because I was like, man, like you're using all the same stuff that you're using in the Sound to catch these like, pretty much smaller landlocked salmon.
Right.
But it like once you put it in that way, it's like, oh, that makes sense to me that you're doing similar methods just on a micro scale. So
right.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it takes some practice and learning to get good with it.
Yeah.
It is nice. It is nice that you don't have to fight the lead. That you're just fighting the
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah.
No extra weight added to it.
I will say one more thing too that was challenging is letting the line out and like trying to run the downrigger on your own. You're like, it's like you start letting the ball out, and then it like I'd be like, oh yeah, I gotta let this, and
Yep.
but once you get it, you get it. But
Yep. You gotta be sure and release it, so then that way it'll go down with the downrigger ball. If not, it really tight and pops
Yep.
off.
yeah,
Start over. And it really sucks when it's down like 120 feet and it pops off and the fish gets off, because then you got to pull that downrigger up 120 feet all the way back to the top, reset it, do it all over again.
you're like,
Mhm.
And
Well, something I learned the hard way is Kokanee have really soft mouths. So
Right. Yep.
I would go to pop that clip and yank a little too hard, and all of a sudden my corn and my fish is gone.
Yep. And then you got to reset. Yeah.
Yep.
you get that.
They got a pretty sensitive mouth.
You got a what?
Oh, they have a pretty sensitive mouth. Like they got a pretty soft mouth, so they pop off pretty frequently.
And the problem with like me and Kylie is we got that trout set, so we'll just like just come up. And so when we get into like other fishing, I mean, I figure I can speak for us both on it, because when you're like fly fishing, you're doing that dry fly set,
Right.
compared to like going into like such a technical game where you got to be like, okay, now you're gonna reel down and kind of and then start fighting it.
Yep, pop it off real slow. Don't horse it in.
So what's your favorite color combo when it comes to setting up a Kokanee rig?
So I'll run my favorite is the Wonder Bread pattern. That seems to be my go-to, is the Wonder Bread with the dots on it.
Nice.
I'll run that with behind a Wonder Bread blade, or a pink blade, just kind of depends. Or I'll run both and figure out what they want. But the Dodger, I typically don't change my Dodger. And I'll just run all Wonder Bread Dodgers.
Yeah. And like, do you kind of bring, you mentioned like corns and maggots, right? Is there anything else that you've tried with Kokanee? And then do you like to bring both to just have both on deck, or do you kind of know like, oh, when I'm going here in this section of the state and I'm fishing Kokanee, like I know that they're going to go for this setup right here?
So typically I'll just bring corn and I'll just use corn. But if I can find maggots, I'll run maggots. It just seems like they're getting harder to find, or they were harder to find at least last year.
Mm-hmm.
The gulp maggots work pretty well. But once again, those are kind of hard to find. So I generally just stick with plain, just white shoe peg corn. It's got to be the shoe peg for whatever reason. I'll just run the shoe peg corn soaked in whichever Kokanee scent that I'm going to run.
Yeah.
Or I'll do a couple different scent options, but generally it's always going to be corn.
Yeah. Nice. So just kind of like we're talking about Kokanee, just for someone that may have never fished Kokanee, what is a Kokanee, and then like how is the fight on a Kokanee fit, like on one of these little salmon?
So a Kokanee is basically just a landlocked salmon that doesn't go to the ocean, because a Chinook salmon or coho, they'll go to the ocean and then come back.
Yeah.
But Kokanee don't do that. They'll still spawn, just they don't go to the ocean.
Yeah. So I believe Kokanee are sockeye specifically, right? They're the
right.
Yeah.
Except the sockeye will just go to the sockeye go to the ocean.
Yeah, but the Kokanee stay locked.
Yep. Landlocked.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. How We kind of covered that. Okay. All right, we're going to change gears here. Do you find yourself doing bycatch for trout when you're kokanee fishing, or when you're targeting trout, do you mix that up too? Like, do you find different depths? Do you find different, certain blades and stuff work better for that? Can you explain about that?
So I'll typically run the same gear for trout and kokanee. It just kind of depends on which body of water I'm going to and what I'll do and what my setup will look like. But generally it's going to be the same standard setup for kokanee and trout that I'll run. Yeah. And I'll be targeting kokanee and you'll pick up a trout here or there. Seems like the trout they're not as deep. But fishing like Rimrock Lake, the kokanee aren't down that deep to start with, and so you'll catch a lot more trout and kokanee versus Chelan where you're fishing 100 and some feet deep sometimes, and you're just catching kokanee.
Yeah, crazy.
Sorry, go ahead. Keaton.
Oh, go. No, you go ahead. I got.
You had brought up earlier, your good electronics are the key to kokanee fishing. You've got to find a pot of fish. When it comes to fishing different depths, how do you find that there's different depths that these fish sit at throughout different seasons? Because I know you can catch kokanee all year round.
Correct. Yep, you can catch kokanee pretty much year round. I know, like fishing Chelan, they'll be super deep when it's colder out in the wintertime, and then they'll start coming up to a little bit shallower water, it seems like. They just basically follow their food, I think. I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah.
But it seems to be that they're deeper in the winter time-ish time frame, and then it seems like summertime, you'll catch them anywhere from 20 to 40 feet. It just kind of depends.
Yeah. When you're going to approach, so like let's say you're going to fish a new lake, right? And you want to target kokanee. I know that we've been talking about depths, kind of a big factor of finding those fish. Are you looking for anything specific on the lake? Are you looking for structures? Do they like to hang around structure? Do they like, are you fishing big like walls? I know some of those Eastern Washington lakes have kind of those big canyon walls sometimes. Can you kind of talk about maybe the geographical, how you're picking out where you're going to fish and stuff like that?
So if I'm going to go fish a new lake that there is kokanee in there and people do catch kokanee in it, mm-hmm. Typically I'll get to the lake and I'll put out my rods and I'll fish, but I'll keep watching while I'm fishing. I'll keep watching my screen to see if I pick up any fish. And if I'm not picking up any fish and there's no fish on the depth finder, then I'll pick up, go try a different spot. But I'm fishing, I'd say I like to start off quite a bit off the bank. So it depends on the lake. I'm trying to think of a good example for it. Like Rimrock Lake, I'll fish right down the middle of Rimrock Lake 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. That's cool.
So that's kind of what I base it off of, depending on if I'm going to go fishing a lake. I'll try and stay off the bank, but not crazy deep. It's just what it comes down to is just a lot of searching.
Yeah. Just trying to find them. I feel like that's kind of what I'm taking away, is just making sure you're finding the fish, and finding the big school. And then once you get that, then you're setting yourself up for success. But,
I've had times where I've found just the perfect batch of fish and I can call it. I'm like, oh, one's going to get bit. One's going to get bit at least. And then boom, rod goes off, or 2 rods go off, or 3 rods go off. But that helps out a lot, having good electronics.
Yeah. When you're running like your pass by the school, do you find that like where that school's sitting, say it's like 100 feet, right? Will you find that fish will sometimes chase it past that like 100 feet mark, like when you're doing a troll over the top, or are you mostly just hitting them where they're schooled up at?
So I'll just run it right through the middle of them. I can see my downrigger ball on my screen,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll drop my downrigger ball down, and I'll just run it right through the middle of them, and pick them up. I'd rather be above fish than below fish, because fish can't see below them.
Yeah.
They're looking more up. So I'd rather be above and then and not be below.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So what fish finder are you using, and kind of what brand do you prefer for electronics?
So I've got all Garmin's. I changed everything over my boat to all Garmin. I've ran the Humminbirds. The Humminbirds aren't bad. It's just the Garmin's are hard to beat with the usability of them. They're super simple to use. The Lowrance, I had issues with trying to get that it all dialed in, and it's not super user friendly. I know a lot of guys use Lowrance. I know a lot of guys use Humminbird, and I know a lot of guys use a lot of different stuff, but the best one that I found for me is definitely the Garmin for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting, because we have a Lowrance on our boat, and yeah, I'm always Googling like, how do I do this? Because they're not super user friendly.
No, and they have Lowrance seems to have a lot of different settings and adjustments and a lot of extra stuff, where it seems like Garmin has it all, just push this, and you're good. Like, you want to zoom in, zoom in. If you want to zoom out, zoom out.
Yeah. It's the simplicity of things, I feel like, is easier for fishermen. That's like what we all want, right? Like in the long run, we don't want something where we have to like go through. I wish I just had like a button for each thing, so I could be like, okay,
exactly,
let me hit this. This tells me like this is my screen. I look at stuff. This is like where I change stuff. This is my setting. So if anyone's listening to this that is from one of these technology companies, this is what we want here. All right.
Help us out.
Why make it
I want to look at fish. Push the button.
Yeah.
Just give me a camera. I need like a GoPro.
Yep.
Exactly. Cool. So I feel like we've covered, kokanee and trout fishing pretty well. Is there anything else that you might, any tips, any last minute things that might pop in your head before we kind of move on to the next topic?
No, just the main thing is get out there, get it figured out.
Yeah.
It just takes time. It takes time and energy to go out there and find the fish and get proficient at it. I mean, kokanee aren't the easiest to catch. They are for me, because I've fished them for so long. It seems to be a little bit easier, but I mean, talk to people that have went out and not caught any kokanee at all on certain lakes, and I can tell you what I'm using, but unless I'm there, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. You got me fired up at the Sportsman Show to go try some kokanee fishing, and now that I need to get out and go try some, because there's a lot of like smaller lakes around here that's what we were talking about, and changing up the size. You're like, well, maybe in Chelan I'm using like this size, but you might be I mentioned fishing like a smaller, deeper lake. You're like, well, maybe try these size. So, but yeah, you got me fired up. I got to get out there and go do some of it.
Definitely. Yeah. It seems like the West Side lakes, they're more finicky fish. They want like the size zero blades, the ones, the twos. But over here, I haven't really noticed a difference. I'm sure people will disagree with me, but I've fished 3.5s for everything for quite a while.
Yeah.
And still hammered out limits to kokanee, no problem.
Yeah.
On a 3.5 blade.
Do you think like colors on this is kind of I know we're like pulling away from it, but now you got me thinking about other questions. Do you think that color plays a factor, like Eastern Washington versus Western Washington?
That I don't know, because I haven't fished over there a ton, so I'm not familiar with what guys are using over there. I just over here I just run like a pink. You can't go wrong with pink. Can't go wrong with green. You can't or the Wonder Bread.
True.
Yeah,
The Wonder Bread works. It looks weird, and I was anti Wonder Bread until I fished it. But after I fished the Wonder Bread pattern, it made me a believer.
yeah, that's awesome.
You know what's funny is my fiance was out kokanee fishing with his cousin, and they had some blade get wrapped up in the kicker prop because I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. I was not involved in this. But all I know is somehow the blade got bent, and that thing caught the most fish for the next 2 weekends. Just something about the way it moved through the water. I don't know what it was. Just
Different
a
action.
plain silver and the action. So we're like, okay, we got to start hitting all our flashers with our prop.
Start banging them on the side of the boat with a hammer.
Yeah, run them over with the car or something.
Yeah.
It was like an injured, like a crippled pattern.
Yeah.
Yep. They that's any little thing to change it up, it seems will sometimes set the fish off. Sometimes it doesn't work though. Sometimes I'll think of a really cool color. I'm like, oh, this is gonna work, and then it doesn't work. I don't catch a fish no matter what I do.
Yeah. Do you find like some of your most like simplistic stuff works better than some of the ones that you're like, oh, I'm gonna make this one like sunset looking, Yeah.
Yeah, I've done some pretty crazy blades and stuff and plugs, and it seems like the simpler type patterns generally are more consistent on producing fish.
Yeah.
I like my blades with dots. Some guys like them with stripes or whatever, or different designs. And I still do paint those blades because that's what some people, they swear by those. And then that's all they want to fish with. Whereas me, I'm fishing a blade that's chartreuse, a pink tip, and 3 dots on it.
Yeah. That's cool. That's awesome. Well, cool. So I wanted to kind of transition into we talked a lot about fishing, but let's talk a little bit more about your business and all of that sort. Just if someone was listening and they're like, hey, I had this idea, kind of gives them an idea of what you had to do and things of that sort. So like, what are some challenges that you faced when you first started your company off?
The first challenge I would say was time, trying to find the time, because it consumes a lot of time. It's a 24-hour deal. When people ask me, oh, well, do you take any days off? I always tell them, well, no, not really, because I run a business and I got to keep it going 24 hours a day, which I had kind of thought that would happen, but I wasn't 100%. But yeah, it's definitely the 24-hour deal.
So, you started your own company, your small business here, and you're based out of Yakima, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So do you find yourself often competing with big name brands that sell a lot of stuff, and how do you kind of cope with that?
So when I started, there was only myself and maybe 2 other people in Eastern Washington that were custom painting stuff. It seems like last year, now everyone wants to be a tackle business owner, spinner blade, Dodger painting person. I don't really know if they're more competition or they're helping me, since I've been around a lot longer than most companies that started obviously last year or this year. As far as the big companies go, people come to me looking for something that isn't sold across the United States, something that's only sold from me or at one of the retail stores that I'm in. They want that something a little bit different colors, not just the generic blades that the big companies push out. So I think that it's a smaller market, but there's definitely a good market there as long as you can get established.
So, since you're on the east side of Washington and you said there's just a couple other guys that are doing what you're doing, do you feel like you have kind of created customized lures specifically for our local water bodies? And do you create patterns that might not exist with the big name brands and they're custom to this area?
Yes. So so I try not to look at other blade manufacturers or other companies that are producing blades. All my blades come from my own ideas and colors and testing blades out, seeing what was working, what wasn't.
Yeah.
So it's more specialized, I guess, for the custom market.
It's cool that you can go out and test them yourself.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Or I have right now I've been having a couple of my buddies go out and run some new colors and stuff versus me doing it because I haven't had the time yet. So I'll generally send a few of my buddies with some blades to try out, and they'll tell me either yay or nay or change this, or it looked good in the water, but it didn't touch a fish all weekend. I don't think you should paint any more of these. And so they try and help me out as much as they can if I can't get out and fish it.
Nice.
Sounds like you need to take some days to get out there, and that's work, right? Product testing is part of it. Yeah.
It is. Yep. It's we try and get away and do some product testing. My wife's more of a fair weather fisher woman type. She doesn't really like to go sit in the rain wet for a springer at Drano when it's windy and blowing. She'll do it. It's just not enjoyable. And anymore, as I get older, I don't enjoy being soaking wet and cold.
Yeah. I get that. Do you find that when something doesn't work that you're able to, like, are you able to repaint something if it didn't work out?
Generally for me, I'll just scrap it and then I just won't paint any more of those. I don't reuse the blades. I don't reuse the blades or the plugs. Yeah.
Do you, when you're trying to test something out, like do you try to run a certain amount to test them out? Like, I don't think you're going to want to make like 50 of them, right? If they're not going to work. So
right. I'll do a small batch. I'll generally do 20 blades of a new color. And then I'll give them out to my buddies to test, and then they'll go run them. And I won't do a crazy batch. Like I can do 100, a little over 100 blades at a time. But if it's a brand new color scheme, then I'll only do just a small batch.
Nice.
So, if someone else were starting out a company similar to yours, what is your best tip for that person to get started?
If they're going to start out, they're just make sure you know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows. 99% of the time, it seems like there's always something going on. Just be prepared for a lot of work and not a lot of extra time.
Yeah. Did you find that do you find like a majority of business comes from those sportsman shows, or do you use that sportsman show as like a way to meet people and get your brand out there?
Yep. So most of the other custom companies, there's quite a few now. I don't even know how many there are now. But it used to just be me, me, and then Hanford Reach Tackle. He was doing a lot of cool custom stuff. And there's a few other smaller guys that were doing it. Now I don't even know. I think there's probably 10 in Eastern Washington at least.
Yeah. And I mean, you go on Instagram, and if you start looking at, like, I'll go on your page and I'll start looking at something, and you start scrolling, it's like, oh, you like that. So here's 100 more companies across the US that do this,
Right.
you know? So I'm sure that you're going to have to, I'm sure you're working on ways to find different things, that you can be first at, right? That's kind of part of the competition. So
yeah, you don't want to be late to the game. That's the thing, is you want to be the first one to come up with the newest, greatest thing.
Yeah.
And most places have a couple guys working at whichever company they're with, and me, and then Hanford Reach Tackle. He paints all his blades, and then I paint all my own blades, one by one. So I don't have an extra painter that can cover X amount of blades for me. I got to do them all myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a lot of work. I mean, we talked about like being a guide and all the steps that we got to do, but your production, your owner, your shippings, your all that. So, I mean, I can't imagine that. It's like one of those things you got to be in that person's shoes to kind of, realize what they go through.
Yeah, I mainly did the sportsman shows to get to go out, meet customers that I hadn't met in person or on the phone, to meet the customers, meet new people, and get my brand out there, my company out there. Which it was a really, really good show season, despite all the COVID stuff that was going on and all that. We still had a really good show season. We hit Tri-City Sports Show, Puyallup, and then Portland and Spokane. It was a good time. Met a lot of people, sold a lot of product. Definitely gonna do it this year or next year, I guess.
That's awesome.
So we've talked about, your custom painted spinner blades, but what else does Double D Outdoors have to offer as far as products go?
So we've got everything from spinner blades to lead cannonballs.
Nice.
And I pour all my own lead, all my own cannonballs. We have walleye stuff, some custom walleye plugs. It's just getting hard to get blank walleye plugs now, which makes it hard.
Yeah.
And then the Kokanee Dodgers, Kokanee blades. That's about it. I mean,
I saw that you guys, when I was at the show, I noticed you guys just recently dropped a line, like a little bit of a clothing line. And then I know you mentioned your wife, she does something too on the other side, right? You have, if you want to just talk about that a little bit.
Yep. So my wife, she makes like Western style fishing jewelry type stuff. She does that, and we sell that on our website and at the shows as well. And then we recently, we didn't change our logo, but we kind of rebranded it for our apparel line. Cool. And she's the one that does all the printing on the sweatshirts and the hats and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is cool. Good teamwork.
You guys are putting in some work. I mean,
we are.
Yeah, you had a lot to offer at the Puyallup show, and when I was there, your booth. I mean, I just the setup that you had, I was like, oh, I got to check this out.
It's always the colors that draw people in. I noticed, like it was bright colors and people just instantly sucked in.
Yeah.
Just like
Okay.
fish.
Yep, exactly.
That's how you know someone fishes, because they're like, oh man, that like chartreuse color looks
Gotta
just
catch the
amazing. You what?
Got to catch the fishermen first.
Yeah, before they go out. That's cool.
Yeah.
This is awesome. We appreciate you. This is great.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've talked a lot about your background and fishing techniques and your business. Do you feel like there's anything else that we haven't asked you that you'd like to add to this podcast?
No, not really. It's been a good podcast.
Covered a lot, from springers to trout, kokanee. Well, cool. We're kind of going to get rolling into our rapid fire round. This is just a fun, we talked a lot of business here. We'd like to end the podcast with something fun. And so with that, Kylie, if you want to get us rolling right here.
All right. We'll start off with what is your favorite fish?
My favorite fish would be salmon.
Okay.
Nice.
Do you have a specific one?
Chinook. It's hard to beat a fall Chinook salmon.
Okay.
They get big. They call them red dragons and whatever, but they're a big fish and they fight pretty good.
Yeah.
They are fun. Okay,
let me ask you this. If there was one way to fish for a fall Chinook, which way would you do it?
Plugs.
Ooh.
Plugs, hands down, guaranteed. That is the craziest bite ever.
I love a plug takedown.
Oh, they're hard to beat.
You're gonna get some float fishermen being like, "Oh, this motherfucker right here."
You can't beat it. Even they can't deny it.
Yeah,
it's all fun, but plug bites are just stupid.
They're violent. You know when the fish is on because you look back and your reel's on fire because it's taking off downriver.
That's awesome. I'm gonna self-invite myself out on your boat, man. I need to get on a king on a plug. That sounds awesome.
Starting next week, I'll be back trolling plugs on the Yakima. So,
yeah.
Plug bites.
Over here, Keaton.
I'm coming. Let me know.
For sure.
What is your dream destination to go fishing?
Alaska.
Like a specific part of Alaska, or like a
Kenai-ish area? Probably go fish Kenai.
Nice.
Yeah. Favorite meal or drink for the outdoors?
Meal or drink for the outdoors?
Or both?
Or like a snack?
I'd say my favorite thing to eat after fishing all day would be like chili or stew.
Nice.
And then drink Coke Zero.
Nice. All right, you're headed out the door to go fishing. You got your boat behind you. What kind of music are you throwing on before you're getting out on the water?
So I'm pretty boring and old now. So it would probably be just Fox News.
Nice.
Listening to Fox News rolling or rural radio. I listen to their farm market reports and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Just as for something to listen to.
Yeah.
Or I listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
Music wise, if I had to choose music, it would probably be rock.
Yeah, I feel it. That's usually my pick right there. What about you, Kylie?
Oh man, I'm a jack of all trades. It depends on the day, I think.
Yeah, that is true.
In time of morning.
Exactly.
Are you going to listen to your own podcast on your way to your next fishing adventure?
I will.
Throwing it on there. Hey everyone, this is me. Let's listen.
Sometimes listening to my own voice, I'm like, okay, we got to change it now. But
you're telling me I'd listen to my voice I'm on 30 episodes now. I'm going to be listening to myself.
Okay. So you're heading out the door. You're going to do something outdoorsy, whether it's hunting, fishing, shed hunting, whatever. What is the first most important thing that you grab?
Unfortunately, diesel. I guess heading out of my house would be my my keys, my wallet.
Yeah.
Good answer. Can't drive without those.
Nope.
So what advice would you have to someone that's just starting out fishing?
Go with a guide.
Go with a guide. Yeah.
Yep. If you want to learn how to salmon fish, kokanee fish, walleye fish, pay the guide. You'll learn a ton in a short amount of time versus going out by yourself trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's the quickest, easiest way. Just find a guide that's going to run whatever fish you're wanting to learn how to fish and go with them.
Yeah. And I feel like it's like most guides that I've been out with are like open books. Like I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going with the guide. Like this guy's not going to want to share. I mean, there are people out there, don't get me wrong, but like the majority of them I've gone with, I'm like, oh, how do you set this up? Or what are you doing here? Or what do you find like, you know, like the questions we're asking, I'm asking my guides. And I mean, there's a couple things they might not be like, oh, I'm not going to do this, but I can tell you that you want to try to this and this, but yeah.
Yeah. Most guides though, they're all about helping teach people. And they're there for the customer, the client to have a good time and learn some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're guiding, you think you're in the fishing business, but really you're in the people business, and
exactly
right.
You don't get a fish, so that's why guides are there, is to teach and to help.
Right. Yep.
Well, and I think people don't realize too is that like I feel like when you give good feedback and people are successful without you, like even though they're having success, they're still willing to come back and fish with you because they want to experience something different, right? Or they want to learn a different season in that year.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I get to say this time. I'm a co-host now. Keaton and Kyle usually like to wrap up the podcast with a favorite guide story or a favorite fishing story. So Ben, do you have a favorite fishing story you'd like to share with us today?
Oh, that's a tricky one.
You're thinking back to all these years of like fishing and you just start popping in your head and you're like, which one?
Diapers at Drano and
that's a pretty good one. I'd say fishing down at Drano, being a little kid, steelhead fishing at night and falling asleep in the bow of the boat with listening to the water hit the bow of the boat, sleep like a baby.
That's awesome.
And I just remember I'd always hear just like the fish flopping around on top of the water, and my dad's reeling it up, getting the net and netting the fish, and I'd just fall back asleep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that just proves right there that like fishing gives you memories, right? Like,
oh yeah,
I feel like I remember the most from all these outdoor things that I'm doing, or you know, it just sticks with you longer.
It does. And I haven't fished Alaska, but I've fished in Texas. I fished in Missouri. I lived in Montana for about 5 years. I fished Montana quite a bit. Right. Montana's got great fishing. Fished in Idaho. Idaho's got really good fishing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've definitely got a lot of memories.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we're kind of wrapping this up. If someone's looking to, you know, buy some lures from you or kind of get a hold of you, what are some of the best ways to do that?
So the best way to get a hold of me is you can email me or text me. Generally I try and check my voicemails in the evening time. But I don't always get around to it. So if someone sends me an email or a text, I'll try and get back to them as soon as I can. And then also on the website, you can go and there's a contact form on there, and that'll send me an email as well.
Cool. And what's your Instagram handle if someone's looking to follow you?
My Instagram handle. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, you're all good.
It's gonna be my Instagram will be double and then underscore D_outdoors.
Cool. And you can't miss it. It's got a mean looking fish on the front. It says Devil D Outdoors, and it's got Ben underneath it. So
Yep, that's me.
Well, awesome. I'll do an outro right here. So, all right. Well, that was another episode of the Young Guides podcast. I just want to thank Kylie for being a co-host today, hopping on, filling in the boots for Kyle. And I hope Kyle's having some success. I also want to thank Ben for taking the time to come out and we'll hop on and just chat about his business, talk about things he faces in the industry, talk about maybe some of the challenges that we're seeing in the newer age, and then how to get on some springers in Kokanee. Make sure to go to his website, check it out. We'll also have a link on www.theyoungguidespodcast.com where you'll be able to hop on, learn a little bit about Ben, hit his website, check some stuff out, make sure you're buying some stuff for yourself and getting out there and sending him some pictures. I also want to just thank you for taking the time and listening to our podcast every week. Me and Kyle and Kylie are working hard at bringing you some good content, trying to get a variety of people from, industry pros to people manufacturing the gear we use to scientists and all of that. So we just really appreciate you and you taking the time, like I said, to listen. You can go on Apple Podcasts and if you want to leave us a review, we would appreciate that. Give us feedback there. Tell us how we're doing, maybe how we can improve. 5-star ratings are great. They're great for us, but also, we got to learn from the 2, 3s, and 4s. So we appreciate that. Spotify, you can do that as well. And then also, like I mentioned before, go and check out our website, www.theyoungguidespodcast.com. We're working on a learning center. You can learn about how to book trips with people or buy stuff like Ben here. So yeah, once again, I just want to thank you all. And if you have served our country, I want to also thank you guys. Make sure to thank your veterans. They sacrifice a lot. So just so appreciative of all you and people who serve. And I'm also appreciative of everyone that listens, like I said. So without further ado, this was another episode of the Young Guides podcast, and I'll catch you on the next one.